Welcome to our first monthly Share the Wealth. Today I'm going to be talking about making portals that stand out. So the problem that we're trying to address here is when the customers ask, have you done any portals that are different from the out-of-box? So I've heard this question from a lot of different customers in a lot of different ways. What are some of the best portal examples that you have? Customers that are looking to be wowed. We did a demo. They asked us to basically mirror their a site that they already had pre-existing. And of course, there's also my favorite. Do you have any examples that aren't 4 icons across? I've been hearing that one since the CMS days, except back then I think it was 3 icons. But really, you got a lot of customers out there that are just interested in seeing more than just what we have in the out-of-box portal, which you can see in the little image at the left there. And of course, the answer is yeah, absolutely. We can definitely achieve a lot of different potential looks and feels, and there are a number of ways that we can go about that. Today, I want to cover 3 particular ways that we can go about making our portals more distinctive. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on the custom layouts aspect using header and footer. I also want to talk about custom icons and images. And lastly, we will finish up with CSS animations. And I'll be demoing via the portal at different points during the conversation. So first up, we've got the portal layouts. So, everybody here has been to plenty of websites, so there's a lot of different potential combinations of layouts, and especially when you start talking about menu types, whether it's the full screen overlay, mega menus, sidebar menus, there's a lot of different styles that we can work with to configure our service portals. So, here I've got a few different examples. Of course, we've got the standard. Basically, the way I've tried to lay these different things out is the blue would be the header widget, the purple would be your footer widget, and then the gray is your content main area. So that first one, of course, is our default service portal layout. Also, the second one, is pretty much default just by not including a footer. But realistically, we can add sidebars. We can add multiple sidebars. We can include the sidebars with the navigation on top. We can embed the footer, or we can have the footer take up full width. There's a lot of different options for how we can go about these different layouts, and Service Portal does have a way to support pretty much all of them. So the theme record is the main aspect that we end up having to deal with, because you can associate a theme with a header and footer. So this is the default portal stacking order. It sticks your header up top, then it's got your main div, and then it's got the footer. And when you look at the HTML structure, that's more or less what it follows. I think there may be a couple wrapper divs in there, but generally speaking, it's the header, main, and footer are all basically siblings of one another. They're at the same depth, and it just stacks using your natural HTML stacking. So the easiest way for us to achieve custom layouts is by using Z-index to create layers on the portal. So instead of stacking it in a 2-dimensional sense, which is the default, we have to start thinking about our portals in terms of 3 dimensions. So you can see the default stacking portal stacking order on the left, and the 3-dimensional layered stacking order on the right. So you can see that basically what we're trying to do is we basically make the header, main, and footer all take up 100% of the height and width of the screen, and then we use Z-index to layer them on top of each other. If you've ever used Photoshop or Illustrator, then you're probably familiar with the concept of layers. And you can basically do the same thing in HTML by manipulating the Z-index. So taking for this particular sidebar layout, you've got a top header navigation, you have a sidebar navigation to the left, and then you have additional contextual information to the right. with the content being straight in the middle. So the way that I have architected this portal is that the sidebars, so you've got the, yes. So
That's awesome.
So you've got the sidebars, the top header, and the right sidebar that are all actually in the header widget. So the header widget is static across all pages. Regardless of which page you're on, the header is visible. So I've put those three pieces of the puzzle into the header layer, and then the main content is on the next layer down. The main exists on the original or main layer. So by doing this with header, footer, and main, we technically have at least 3 layers that we can work with. Now, using your position absolutes and changing the Z indexes, you can add multiple layers within the header, multiple layers within the footer, and you can start to achieve, you know, some really, really complex layouts if you so desire. So this is what the actual portal looks like. And I've highlighted all of the content that is in the header widget in green, and I've highlighted the main section in yellow. Now, in reality, again, when we take a look at this in a moment, you'll see that I'm actually taking up the full 100% height and width with these components on each layer. So we're just using that stacking mechanism in order to achieve the look. So with that, let's pause our presentation for a moment and jump into our portal. So this is what the portal looks like in the dev environment right now. And just to highlight a couple of things here, the navigation menu on the left is collapsible using our little button down here. And it's also semi-responsive at the moment. I've still got some things to work out on the responsiveness. Right now, things just disappear. But you can see as I change the screen size, everything slides back in naturally. And one of the big advantages of doing this header main content approach is when I go to pre-existing pages. So this is the existing out-of-box, pretty much unchanged knowledge page, knowledge homepage. So the only thing that I have done on these pages is I have edited the container backgrounds and I've changed them to fluid. So I changed them from fixed to fluid so that they take up the appropriate amount of space in here. But otherwise, I really haven't changed any of the widgets. All the pages are basically out of box. I haven't had to customize any of these other widgets. All this is just a header widget overlaid over top of the main content. So if I do a little inspect element to show you guys a little bit more here, you can see that we've got the header, and then we've got the section which actually contains our main content. And you can see the main content being highlighted in blue there. So the section you see is basically full width. Now, in this case, I have left the actual header tag in the normal flow, but what I have done is I have moved the sidebar, the left sidebar and the right sidebar. Oh, gotta get the right, there we go. I've moved the left sidebar and the right sidebar out of the main flow by using the position fixed. So you can see the position fixed right here. If I were to remove it, everything would break. So it's highly dependent on the position fixed or position absolute. But so basically we've leveraged these different layers and manipulated the Z index. You can see that my Z index is up at 1,000 on this one. And I forget exactly what I've set all the Z indexes to, but basically, if you're not familiar with the concept of Z index, all it is the bigger the number, the higher up it sits, the closer it sits to your, to where you see it. all the higher Z indexes are on top of the lower Z indexes. So shifting it to 1001 shifts it one index up. But so leveraging that approach, we were able to accomplish the sidebar navigation on each side. We were able to maintain the top navigation header. And the way that the main content here works, if I can dive into it real quick, and you may have seen it a moment ago, is the green there is padding. So what I've done is I have left the section at 100% width, but I've added padding to shrink the main content to only fit this particular section of the screen. So with that, I was able to achieve the desired layout. And you know, aside from the custom header, there's not a whole lot involved in it. If we take a look at the theme for this one, you know, it's really not that long of a theme. I've got a couple of overrides in here. Most of the theme is taken up by some standard classes that wanted created. But if I remove all that and strip it down, it's less than 100 lines of CSS, if I remember correctly, that is actually accomplishing most of that particular layout. So there's not a whole lot there that that can go wrong. The widgets, again, is custom, so there is a little bit of risk in this. A lot of it is copied from the out-of-box. You know, got the HTML, the CSS is a little bit longer in there. And that's just to provide a lot of your stylings around what these sidebars look like and some of the animations. The server script is pretty much copied almost verbatim from the out-of-box, as is the client controller. So in all reality, the main thing that I've changed is the HTML and CSS. Everything else is pretty close to out-of-box, and that's really going to help make this thing more maintainable over time. And prevent, you know, different issues from cropping up. One of the advantages that I wanted to highlight is you can see this is a training app that we've been working on from an internal perspective, and you can see that I've leveraged the sidebar on this one as well. But the big difference, and this is how I see the sidebars typically implemented, is that it's actually on the page. So if I go into the page designer, basically the sidebar is a widget that gets embedded into each and every page. Now, the problem with that is that if you have to make changes, then you may end up having to make changes across multiple widgets. So you really have to be careful when doing the widget approach, because you either have to sacrifice, excuse me, you either have to sacrifice configurability on the widget and make it more static coded, or you have to put maintenance risk where you may end up having to go in and reconfigure that widget on every single page that you're dealing with. So that is a huge advantage to doing it within the header, because it's all locked into one place. You can provide one single portal level configuration and achieve the layout that you're looking for. All right, so with that, we'll move on next to icons and images. One of the things that you may have noticed about the portal as we were going through it is that I am not using the Bootstrap glyph icons. The glyph icons are really, really great for doing some simple configurations, but one of the limitations is that you know, you tend to get a lot of portals that look exactly the same. And when customers are looking for that distinctive look and feel, when they're looking for something that, you know, is as unique as their ITIL processes, it can be helpful to use different iconography. Maybe they provide it themselves. Maybe you pull something from outside. In JP Morgan's case, they provided me with a set of icons called feather icons, and it was up to me to pull those in. So some of the different places that we can leverage our icons and images are in container backgrounds, which I'm sure we're all familiar with those if you've touched Service Portal at all. Menu item icons, like you can see in the image at the left. Simple list icons. So simple lists can include images and icons. And also a lot of your different panels, a lot of your different widgets support configuring some sort of glyph icon to put in the top of that panel. So how can we go about leveraging some of these custom icons and getting away from just the basic glyph icons? Well, the first approach is that you can add image fields or class CSS fields to your widget instances and their related lists. And really this is about creating custom fields on those widget instance tables. On this image, you can see that I've manipulated the menu item table, and I have added a separator class and an icon class to that particular table. This is a fairly low risk customization, because if you add it and you're using it in your instances or in your widgets, you don't have to worry about any out-of-box widgets accidentally using it. You don't have to worry about your widget pointing at the wrong thing. It's tightly coupled to your widgets. So the only thing it's ever going to cause an issue with is your own widgets. But down in the My Tech Hub config, I added the ability to configure a separator on each menu item. So I'll jump out real quick. That's these line separators here. So today you can ask me to add another line separator between request something and password resets. And I can very easily open up that menu item, put the checkbox in place, and the separator will pop up. No code changes required. So this really lets you expand and enhance on the configurability of your widget instances. You can also do this from the instance options standpoint. And actually, let me jump out one more time, and this is going to be a spontaneous thing. So we were doing some work on the public portal today, and actually discovered a new way that does not require doing it on your widget instance or your instance related lists. The instance options, so if I come in here and I go to our widget table, and I'll pull up the carousel as an example. All of your instance option schema is stored in this option schema table, and basically it is an array of all the different options and types. There is no publicly demonstrated way of choosing an image from your instance options. But what we discovered today is that your instance options are actually, under the hood, just field types. So you can actually change the type to the field type user image, and it gives a really nice UI for being able to upload images just like the background image on your containers. So you actually can do this from instance options as well as we discovered today. And we discovered that one by looking at one of ServiceNow's native widgets. So it's not a unknown feature. It's actually something that ServiceNow has done in their own widgets. They just haven't documented it yet. So that was a cool find from today. All right, so back on track. So with the CSS classes, if you choose to do the CSS class approach, then you end up having to use custom font icons. Font icons basically just package up your vectors of those icons into a single file. And it's just like using a font like Arial, Helvetica, any of your other fonts. You can apply that particular font family, and usually your font icon kits will give you classes similar to Font Awesome or the glyph icons. You can go in and apply the CSS class, and it will inject the proper icon. Now, one of the cool things is that we can actually create custom font icons. IcoMoon is one tool out there that you can use to create your own custom font icons. And I did end up having to do this with JP Morgan because they provided me with the vector graphics, not a font icon. So in order to do, oops, go back. In order to do this, what we have to do is we have to create a custom style sheet record in your theme. You have to base64 encode the font icon files, and then you use what's called a data URL in the CSS in order to embed those base64 encoded files in the style sheets. Now, that for some of you may seem really complicated and kind of scary. So I'm going to take a minute to kind of show what exactly ends up happening. So I'm on Mac, and so I've got a really easy way of doing base64 encoding. There's actually a base64 command, and basically it's just base64 input file name, output file name. And so this particular file here, I think I used the WAF maybe. It was either the TTF or the WAF, but basically you take your font file and you run it through a base64 encoder. For me, as I said, I can do that through terminal command line. That'll work on Linux or Mac. I'm not sure if Windows has the same, but you can also look up ways of doing it on Font Squirrel. I know that there's a blog article out there in the community that will show you how to do it as well using Font Squirrel. But basically what you end up with in the output is you get this big blob of garbage. And this is your base64 encoded file. This also is the same format that all of your attachments in ServiceNow are stored in. So ServiceNow also has internally native ways of taking an attachment and converting it to base64. So then you go to your theme record and you create a custom style sheet and add it to your theme. And there's a format for your data URL. So data application, there you go, it's the WAF file that I used. Xfont WAF for WAFs, and if you look this one up on Google, you will see what these formats are, and you should be able to easily mimic it. The character set, base64, and then you take that huge file that I just copied, and you just dump it in there at the end of your data URL, close parenthesis, semicolon, and you're ready to go. And then everything else in here is just the font icon CSS style sheet. Basically every font icon kit that you use, or if you use the IcoMoon or something similar to generate your own, all of them will generate this CSS file for you. So all you're doing is you're manipulating that source to use your base64 encoded instead of your traditional URL string. So using that technique is how we were able to achieve all the different custom icons in the portal. So you can see that we've used it here. So each of these menu items, if I go to my portal menus, and that's the sidebar. So my tickets, for example, I've applied the icon toggle right class, which is just using that font icon kit to add that particular icon. Could just as easily have used glyph icons or any other font icon kit that you can get your hands on. I've used the icons up here. And there may be a couple of other places. Down in here, I've used a couple of the font icons. So, you can see how this can help give you a very distinctive look on your portal that sets it apart from the base out of box. Then the last thing that we want to cover is animations. Animations are, aside from the layouts, probably the easiest way to just really astound and wow people. Most portals, even those being built by most of the other partners, they don't use animations, at the very least not extensively. There may be some subtle ones out there, but most of the portals I've come across in the wild, they don't extensively use animations. It's a very static site, and it leaves the site feeling kind of flat. CSS animations intimidate a lot of people because it looks like there are a lot of moving parts to it. It looks very complicated, and it tends to make people shy away from it. But realistically, CSS animations are very easy to implement once you understand the basic structure of it. And it's a very easy way to win a lot of wow points with your client. So some of the places where you can use these CSS transitions are, of course, collapsible menus and panels. I showed the one a little bit earlier that we're using on JP Morgan. Slide out, slide up panels. You can also use for the tile, for your different tile links. When you hover on it, you can lift the tile to give it a little more elevation. You can make the tiles tilt. You can add different animations on that. I have also used custom animations on different icons as well. And there are a lot of different pre-made animations that you can research and Google, where they basically give you a CSS class to use, and all you have to do is plug it in. And those are really cool because you can get some of those really neat animations where you click the hamburger menu and it turns into an X, and then you click the X and it turns back into a hamburger menu. And so, there's a lot of different options in terms of these animations, but what really helps make animations stand out is when they are given a purpose. Like with your hamburger animation that I was just talking about, it draws your eyes to it and it lets you know that the intent of that button has changed. It has changed from an open to a close. When you hover over something, it shows you this is the item that you're hovering on. The collapsible menus opens up more screen real estate to allow users to focus on their specific area that they're interested in. So you can really use animations to help bring attention to the intent of the portal, the intent of the different interactions that you're using. So it serves more than just a cosmetic purpose. There's also a user experience factor where you're kind of having a communication or a conversation with the user using these animations. So with that, how do we go about plugging those in? Now, as I said, animations are actually very, very easy to implement in the simplest sense. So with the sidebar expand and collapse, you can see in the image to the left, that's kind of the code, roughly speaking, that I'm leveraging here. Mine is a little bit more complicated than this to accommodate some of the other requirements, but this is the base foundation of it. So to create a CSS transition, and there are two types of animations. There's transitions and then there's animations. Transitions are the simplest one to implement. All of you really need is a starting class, your base state, for example. So the sidebar describes how the sidebar should be when the page loads. Then you need an end class, and you can, or a selector, which you can see I used sidebar closed. to accomplish that one. Then you have to use the transition CSS property. Transition allows you to specify first the property that should be animated. In this example, you can see that I'm transitioning the width. The time to perform the animation, in this case, 2 seconds. The animation will take place over a period of 2 seconds. And the basically the acceleration curve. So does it start, over the period of that 2 seconds, does the animation start really fast? Or does it start really slow and build up over time? Ease in out is my favorite one, and it's kind of the default go-to that I usually use. There's ease in, ease out. You know, ease in moves slower at the beginning and speeds up over time. Ease out moves fast in the beginning and then slow at the end. Ease in and out is slower on both sides, faster in the middle. And you can also use some other functions like cubic Bezier to really go crazy. But unless you're an animation specialist, I personally usually end up Googling it and copying somebody else's cubic Bezier curves because I don't even know what cubic Bezier means. So, so that is the base for what you need in order to accomplish an animation. With this very simple setup here, you can see that pointing back at the image on the left there, sidebar starts out at a width of 350 pixels. And at the end of the transition, when I apply the closed CSS class, the width becomes 3 EMs, which is basically the width of my icons. So if I come back over to my portal, I'm going to refresh to get rid of the little bug there. So when I click on this icon here, it is applying the collapsed or the closed class to the container that I want to change the width of. So I click it, the class is applied, and the CSS animation does everything in between. So you see the animation has gone away. I've eliminated all the transitions, and this guy just snaps shut.
That's awesome.
So adding that subtle transition really helps guide the user to what's happening. And you can see that in conjunction with the other animation of my padding changing, I've got the whole panel sliding with each other. And the added benefit, as I showed earlier, is that when I open it up and let those sides come in, they don't just pop into existence. They slide in from somewhere. And if you do some research on user experience design, one of the things that they talk about is well, and you know, with consultants, this is a big thing as well, as managing expectations. You have to manage the user's expectation. People expect things to come from somewhere, not to just pop in out of nowhere. So when things pop in, it can be jarring, but those subtle animations help give visual cues as to where different things are. And it can help users feel more comfortable with the interface that you're leveraging. So yeah, with the CSS, that's a really easy way to do it. Now, I am not going to cover the animations aspects simply because animations are much more complicated. You have to use what's called keyframes, and you basically set up how the animation behaves during each period of the transition. There's a lot more that goes into creating those, so I'm not going to go over it today, but know that there are, you know, if you do need to heavily customize those animations, it is possible to do so. And with that, that is all we have for today. So just to quickly recap, the 3 things that we can do to really help make a service portal stand out for our customers is we can change the layout. We can change it from the static default layout by using Z-index and our header and footer. I forget the second one. I should have had a slide for this. So the second one, let's go back to the beginning. It's my presentation and I can do what I want. Custom icons and images, that's what it was. So the second thing is we can add custom icons and images. That also applies to custom fonts as well, if I did not already mention that. And the third thing is we can add custom CSS animations to really enhance those styles and give us that really robust user experience.